All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of Proof of Vision. Today was a repeat guest. We had Thiago, who's the head of the Tanssi Foundation, on. For those of you that haven't watched our previous episode, go check it out. But really, that episode was focused more on how does Tanssi work, and what are the use cases they see for it in the future, and how do they decentralize it, etc. And today's episode was awesome because we really focused on how they've been executing on the roadmap we discussed from the first time that we talked until now. And it's been awesome to see, the token obviously launched for Tanssi. Their first L1, was announced and actually came on board to mainnet. So we talked about the use cases of that. And really everything else that they have cooking in the pipeline coming out for the network in the next quarter or two. So great to catch up with Thiago. We talk about what happened in the markets recently as well for those of you that want a different perspective on things. But it was great catching up with them, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Obviously, if you do, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of Proof of Vision. Take care. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Proof of Vision. We have a repeat guest on today. A few months ago, we interviewed Thiago for the first time at the Tanssi Foundation, but we've got him back here to talk about everything that they've been executing on. So I'm really excited. Thiago, how are you, sir? How are you doing?
Doing great. How about you, Kirk? Great to be here again.
Yeah, doing great. It's been a tumultuous time in the markets in the last 10 days, actually, which I know you wrote about a little bit. Actually,
maybe about it.
Yeah. Let's start there. Actually, I know you wrote a piece about kind of what you thought was going on the 10th, which is about 10 days ago now. But yeah, what's your take on what happened? And where do we go from here? Is everything dead? What do you think is going to happen?
So many things to talk about. Actually, I started to write this piece, and eventually, when I realized it was really big, but I think it's a combination, right, of a bunch of stuff. So if you think about crypto, the state of crypto right now, you have so many coins and so much leverage and so many pairs that are trading multiple venues. So it's a very complicated landscape, right? And when you have such a big movement done in such a short, time, it really, it's never going to stop on the right value, right? So it's going to overshoot. That's a very old theory by Schiller, and I even mentioned that in the chat in the piece that I wrote. But markets in general, they are not rational, right? So they never, you see that in traditional markets, you see that in crypto, of course, as well, but with crypto steroids. But whenever, when you have the FOMO hitting and it's a massive bull run, the price is always going to go up, in a very irrational way. And the same happens when you have a negative event, right? But I think one of the takeaways of my piece is that when you have such a big amount of leverage as we have right now, and crypto is already a big market, $4 trillion, but this is very fragmented as well, right? And when you combine those things, the plus the overreaction of people, that's already traditional behavior of the human being, so that can be very devastating. That's what we saw. 2 weeks ago. But yeah, it's insane. A bunch of top tier tokens going down 60% in 3 hours or so. Man, yeah, it's impressive.
It was crazy. It always reminds me whenever we've seen these before. Obviously that was the worst, right? But It always reminds me, I'm a terrible trader, number one, but it always reminds me why I never touch leverage, because you don't know, the next second could be, another repeat of the 10th, right? Some of the things you brought up in your article, I thought was really interesting, actually, that I hadn't seen anybody talk about was we all kind of hail crypto as this, decentralization, maximalist marketplace kind of paradigm where there's 24/7 trading, freedom of the financial markets, all that stuff, which I agree with 100%. But one of the downsides is, you brought up that in these traditional markets, obviously when there's these extreme like liquidations or like the crazy volatile events, you do have a stoppage of the market, right? They pause the market,
Yeah.
and people kind of criticize that a lot because a lot of people are like, oh, they're screwing up my upside, right? But also a lot of the times they're protecting you on the downside a little bit more.
Yeah.
While they kind of sort out the market, make sure everything's efficient. And that doesn't happen in crypto, so you don't have those same safety blankets, as maybe you do.
It can happen, right? Because you can even have imagine like a fully regulated world where all the exchanges they obey to certain rules, whatever. You're always gonna have DeFi, so you can't stop DeFi, right? So that's a structural thing. So what's the point on stopping centralized exchanges if you cannot stop, the decentralized ones? And plus, like if you see like the recent advances of the order book exchanges, the order book taxes, you have like so much liquidity in some of these pairs, and you just can't stop it. So what's the point on stopping the centralized exchanges if you cannot stop the other ones? So it's just I always say that money is like water, right? It always finds a way, like a less resistant way usually, but there's a way most of the times, right? So that's definitely something interesting to observe. I think we're never going to have circuit breakers in crypto.
Yeah,
Structurally, it's very hard to do.
It's a good point, and it makes me think though, because like on the horizon here, everybody's talking about it, right? Is the tokenization of equities, and that will enable obviously 24/7 trading, right? And now when that happens, the same paradigm exists now, right? Where like, does it make sense to
It's a very good point.
And what's going to happen, in the traditional markets is I think people are going to lose their shirt a lot more than they have because now those safety blankets maybe don't exist, the same way that they did before, right? So interesting about that.
No, I agree, and I think a lot of people think about cash issues, right? So sometimes you trade in after hours, something that's require margin, and you don't have enough time to cover the margin in traditional finance, right? And then you don't have enough time to cover the margin because eventually you are trading offshore and you need to settle an FX operation before to send this cash to cover. So and then what the prime brokers do at the end of the day, they send you an email and they pray you to honor your margin call next business day, which sometimes is a Friday, and then next business day is like many hours after, right? A few days after. So and that's actually a very good point because like tokenizing bonds and tokenizing money market funds is amazing because you have like more room to work on these type of things, because you're essentially moving cash or cash equivalent stuff. But when you start moving 24/7 more volatile assets like stocks or derivatives, right? So that's and you don't have a circuit breaker as you just discussed. Then that's really makes things more fun.
Yeah, no, for
so
sure.
to say.
For sure. Well, you guys have been having a lot of fun, and Tanssi, the last
Good fun.
Good fun, exactly. Not that kind of fun. But yeah, it's great to have you back on. Obviously, the last time we spoke, we talked about several things that were kind of on the horizon for you. One of them was obviously onboarding your first kind of sovereign L1. You guys just recently announced that, so I figured that would be a good place to start. Actually, is let's talk about that L1 opportunity. And give us kind of the rundown on Trexx. What is Trexx? What are the benefits that they saw from the Tanssi infrastructure that you guys are providing? Take us through the integration a little bit and the positives.
Yeah, I think many things to unpack, and just to give some context, right? So you use the word L1, and I think that's very interesting because we are hearing more and more the word L1s. So especially after Circle announced their L1, Circle Arc, and then Tempo is making a lot of noise. They just hired a super top tier researcher from Appchain-as-a-Service, Even Bankless wrote about that. So I think Tempo from Stripe is also like attracting so much attention in the market. There's also Google Cloud, who just announced their own L1. So I think what we are seeing right now is that it's almost like a L1 renaissance kind of thing, because the first flavor of L1s was really like forking Ethereum, sorting out your nodes, attracting sticky liquidity, and we saw a lot of teams doing that. And of course, it's very capital intensive, it's very engineering intensive as well to do all of that. And that's actually why we built Tanssi. I think some of these bigger names that we just said, they are going that way. So they are creating their own versions of whatever EVM chain, and they have, they are sorting their nodes and etc. But we are talking about, giant corporations, right? So companies that have shitload of money to spend, and that's not the case for many projects, right? And that's why we built Tanssi, right? So to offer like a very capital efficient way to deploy their own chains and benefit from all the benefits that you can have from that. And if you see the competitive landscape for us, is pretty competitive. If you think about the client, is not that competitive if you think about a tech stack. And what I mean about that is that, take Base as an example, right? Could Base be running as an L1? It could, but that's a rollup, right? So I think the rollup narrative was kind of winning for a while. I think for many reasons, bigger teams, they are now going back to look at the L1s. And that was always like our vision. And that's why we decided to build Tanssi as an L1 as a service protocol, an Appchain-as-a-Service protocol, instead of a rollup as a service protocol, right? And I think there are many benefits from that. And just to make the hook to Trexx, which actually the reason why they decided to build an L1 instead of a rollup, or even like just using a shared smart contract layer. It's exactly because of some of the competitive advantages that layer one offer, right? But just what is Trexx about, right? So Trexx is it's a company that's doing a lot of interesting things with content creators and teams that are e-games teams, right? So it's a massive thing these days. So gaming industry in general is massive. If you throw back like a few years ago, the biggest acquisition from Microsoft, for instance, was Activision. It was a $75 billion deal. That was the biggest acquisition till that days. I think that was 2021. And then of course ChatGPT came, but like till that point, it was like the biggest acquisition ever. So that's a massive business. And we are talking about massive corporations, Microsoft, Activision. So that's a lot of people still maybe not in our industry, right? We all are gamers somehow. We all have our PS5s. They might be very used or not as used, but we all have our video games or our games installed in our phones or computers. But if you think about the people in our age in general, like they still see video games as something for kids, right? Which is not necessarily true. Like the numbers of the industry say a lot. And what we saw in the last years is that the gaming market, the competitions, and all this environment over there got very professionalized. And one thing that these guys are very, very good at is building community. If you see like the amount of engagements in Twitch, or even the amount of people that buy membership or like just buy shares of whatever project just to support their idol, or I don't know, their favorite player. So it's very impressive, the numbers actually. I was seeing there is a very famous Brazilian player called Gaules, and he's an international player, and he came from a favela and has a very beautiful story of success. And this guy, he started an academy, right, just to train other players, to just teach them like a profession, a possible profession based on gaming. And this guy was selling shares for subsidizing the construction of this academy, this training center. And the top share was costing, I think, like $150K. So that's a lot of money. And like people were paying it, and he sold like 8 or 10 shares of this thing. just because they love him and they wanted to it's almost like a charity idea as well, like but they are not becoming a partner, they are not investing, they're not getting equity on that, they don't have any counterparty other than supporting this idol, this player, and also the social project that he's building. And so my point is that that's a lot of money that's involved, and sometimes without any monetization behind. And just back to Trexx, what Trexx is doing is like, there might be ways to monetize this big community that these guys manage to create over time, right? Again, they are very good at creating communities, to the extent that this community even wants to deploy money and spend money on things and support these players and these teams. So what Trexx is doing is like adding ways to these bigger communities to just subsidize to monetize their communities, right? Which is amazing. So it's a very interesting landscape for e-games in Brazil as well. We have bigger names here. So I think that's a very interesting use case. And why they decided to build their own L1 is exactly like they are targeting massive audiences, right? I don't know numbers from the top of my head, but if you take for instance, Vasco is a big football team in Rio, where I'm based. So Vasco has an esport teams. All the major teams in Brazil, they have esport teams as well. And then you have the e-game specific teams as well. So we are talking about a lot of traction, a lot of traffic, right, in this systems. So that's one of the cool things that the Appchains and L1s allow for, right? So it's a very scalable system, while we don't lose the decentralization aspect, right? So if you think about Trexx chain, for instance, they leverage Tansi's decentralized infrastructure. So all the decentralized sequencers set, the decentralized validator set. So it's not like in rollups, right? When you have like a very scalable and cheap solution, but you penalize the decentralization part of it. So in this framework that we managed to build with Tanssi, we just have best of both worlds. So you still have a very decentralized tech stack, while you can offer this scaling solution for teams that are dealing with massive amount of users, massive amount of activity in general. Just to give a number about Trexx, when they launched their first version in testnet like a few months ago, they had 500 wallets. Now, like a few months after, they have 15,000 wallets already. I think 17,000 wallets. That was like really like in less than 6 months, right? So it's really like booming. And these guys, they already closed with 17 teams, esports teams. So they are growing a lot. And the teams itself, they are growing a lot as well. So they really need something very scalable. So that's a very interesting use case. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Pendle. Pendle is a leading protocol in the DeFi yield sector, operating as a permissionless yield trading protocol, facilitating the tokenization and splitting of any yield-bearing assets in DeFi. This allows users to speculate on future yield or earn a fixed rate on their assets. Learn more at pendle.finance. Yeah, no, it's these kinds of use cases that I think people kind of lose perspective of a lot. Everybody focuses so much on the financial, like the purely financial, I guess, use cases for crypto, right? DeFi, payments, etc. But really like onboarding kind of like the social layer in the ways that people can interact like socially through crypto rails is really interesting, because I think you're seeing that trend right now in Web 2, right? Where you've seen the rise of Twitch, you've seen the rise of, Kick. You've seen, obviously YouTube has been around for a while now, but you're kind of seeing like this trend towards how can we monetize everything? Some of these streamers are just making obscene amounts of money, and you're seeing kind of like the new generation looking at that, right? And they're thinking, okay, maybe there is a different way to like monetize things in this life versus the traditional way that we've been brought up, historically. And I think it's like being early to those kinds of use cases for crypto that I think is really going to start onboarding. We talk about mass adoption all the time. If we want mass adoption, we've got to kind of find ways to get ahead of the curve a little bit. I feel like so much of crypto is trying to cater itself towards what's been built, by the boomer, the boomer generation and the generations before that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I think that there's also got to be kind of like this focus on how do we build for, Gen Z, and some of these
Yeah,
newer,
for sure.
right? And I think that this is kind of a perfect use case that encapsulates kind of those ideals a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Also, I think, I mean, rightfully so. There is the killer app in crypto today is really like stable coins and RWAs. And I mean, it's stable coins are in a sense RWAs and everything that, this technology allows for. So effects by stable coins, international payments, so it's amazing to see all of that. But I'm also excited about this non-financial use case. Sometimes like it starts as a non-financial use case, but becomes financial eventually. But crypto is very financialized in general. But this case of Trexx is very interesting, right? Because they are targeting like a massive community that's really based on LATAM. So that's very interesting as well. That we are seeing more and more, even VCs and other big liquidity providers in the market. They see LATAM as this kind of this driver of adoption of crypto in general. And being based here, that's actually what we are seeing. So Trexx is a very good example. So they abstract a lot of the Web3 part of things. I think Gotas Social is also another project in our ecosystem that's also doing. They are not targeting e-games; they are targeting content creators in general. But that's also another. I mean, gamers are content creators in a sense, but like these guys are targeting KOLs, crypto KOLs, or other types of KOLs, and they are also creating ways for them to interact with their communities. So that's these two are good, very, very, very good examples of non-financial use cases that are just something that, couldn't be allowed for any other tech but crypto, right? So crypto allows for that. And it's super interesting use cases for sure. And to your point about Gen Z, sort of just back to that. I think, we, of course, like trading, it's a massive use case, affects via stable coins, RWA investing as well. But, if you think about the Gen Z and like the younger generations in general, they are more tech friendly, like on average than we are, right? And that's going to be more and more so like the younger is the generation. So I think that the chances of the stickiness that we want to see in crypto in these people, like the younger the generation is, I think the stickier the technology is going to be. And just creating these use cases that interact with those generations, that's already a big thing for crypto adoption longer term, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to double click on something. This has kind of been a
Mm-hmm.
theme throughout this conversation. I know you guys write about this a lot, on the social side for Tanssi, but everybody focuses so much on like the APAC region. Focus on Korea and China and Vietnam. At least a lot of people in DeFi are. I know, but I think LATAM is an area that doesn't really get its due, I guess, in terms of actual adoption. And I know this is something you guys are heavily focused on, with what you're building. Obviously, one of the first L1s you brought on was a Brazilian company. But maybe talk about LATAM a little bit. Like, why do you think there's such, I guess, a thirst and a hunger for crypto, in that region? And how are you guys leveraging that as part of your growth strategy?
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. So I agree with you that like I think from a long time everybody saw the US, Europe, and APAC as like the drivers of crypto adoption, and I mean that makes sense, especially because most of the tech is being built in developed markets. All the exchanges they are in Asia, the big exchanges. So this mindset made sense. But what we are seeing actually is that crypto is gonna be adopted where you have actual problems, right? And think about LATAM, right? So Brazil wrote the book of inflation. We have a more established economy right now, and we have less inflation rate. And surprisingly, after COVID, we had even less inflation than the US, for instance. So that's amazing achievement. But it still has like a very volatile inflation rate when you think about the region as a whole. I mean, have Argentina, Venezuela, and other countries as well that are facing macro financial crises. I mean, every country has their caveats, but you know, my point is that here we have actual problems that can be solved with crypto, right? So in Brazil, we have very high interest rates. So there are many projects that are just bridging capital from developer markets. Some of them in Asia, actually. There is a very interesting report launched by a company called Amfi together with Onigiri Capital, which is a VC that it's like I don't know if I can say this word like spin-off or something like that. So they are very close to Sazon Capital, which is a massive fund,
Yep.
multi-billion, like $30 billion fund. That most of the capital came from Japan, and they have an operation in Singapore as well. So MFI and Onigiri Capital, they just launched a very interesting report talking about opportunities in LATAM and private credit in LATAM as well. So when you raise funds from very developed markets, right, that have nearly zero interest rates being paid to liquidity providers in their countries, and you bridge this capital to LATAM, where you can have very juicy interest rates being paid even in dollar terms, which means like after hedging the local currency risk, right, volatility. So that can, like, extrapolating that in a very large scale, that can even have an impact in the interest rates in Brazil, if you think about that, because you are just attracting so much capital in a way lower interest rates. So what's the interest of you as a business owner to pay interest rates to a local bank here if you can pay lower interest rates and still generate a shitload of yield for that investor that's sitting in zero interest rates in Japan, in Singapore, whatever. So I think that's a very fascinating angle. So I would encourage everybody that's curious about LATAM market to read this report by Amfi and by Onigiri Capital. They also counter with the support of Pinheiro Netos Advogados, which is like a very big a law firm here in Brazil. So that's a cool one. Also, Chainalysis just launched a very interesting and very insightful report about LATAM as well. I'm even writing about those two reports because I think there are very interesting angles there that can be highlighted, and I have a lot of comments about that. So it's super interesting. So we saw that very early. So from the co-founders of Tanssi, most of us are Latinos, right? So I'm based in Brazil. We have Kathy, our CMO. She's Peruvian. She lives in the US, but she's Peruvian. We have also Francisco. He's originally from Venezuela, but he lives for almost most of his life in Europe. But we all know our regional markets, and we all understand like the challenges of the region. So I think very early on we started to pitch those fintech companies here in Brazil. And Brazil is the land of fintech, right? So I even wrote about that as well. Like so many fintechs that are getting like massive scales. Like Nubank is a very big one, but we have many others. So I think Brazilians are very keen to adopt technology in general. And the success of the fintechs is one reflection of that. And these, the fact that I'm here, right, and I'm a local speaker, I use WhatsApp, right, which sounds silly, but just using the right communication channel makes the whole difference. And just the fact that you can speak the local language as well. I can just get a plane and in 40 minutes I'm in São Paulo, and I can move and have in-person meetings, and I can invite people to have lunch. So that makes a lot of difference in the deal making in LATAM in general. It's a very in a sense, old school way of doing business. But what I like about that is that the relationships are more are deeper in general. And once you start making business with those companies, that's really you can make a lot of cool stuff. And I would say like although you were right in what you said, that like most of the growth was expected to come from these other regions, I think there are many VC funds and even liquid funds that are already deploying like considerable amounts of capital here in the region. And we are seeing a lot of fundraisers with players like CoinFund, like Framework, Parafy, Circle Ventures, right? So top tier global scale investors investing like decent amounts of capital here in LATAM. So I think although we have this very clear setup where like the tech is mostly built outside of LATAM, we have LATAM builders, LATAM founders getting this tech and putting into a very in a product that solves real problems in a very easy way to use. And that's why we're seeing so much adoption here in the region. And the numbers speak for themselves, right? So it's a very interesting landscape to be working with.
No, that's great. Well, they say in investing, you find your edge by doing, don't follow the crowd, do something different. And it's kind of the same for business strategy, a lot of the times too. So it's awesome to see, and obviously I'm sure that we're going to see this trend continue for you guys in terms of the clients that you're going to be bringing onto the network. Let's talk about that a little bit too. So obviously this was, again, we talked about it like more of like a social use case. What are some of the other use cases that you're seeing that maybe we'll see on Tanssi by the end of the year or maybe in Q1 of next year? What's on the horizon in terms of more L1s?
It's a lot of stuff and a little alpha here. Like we have like a very interesting roadmap of onboarding, right? So how was the launch, right? So we launched the token. We launched our own chain, and our chain also leverages our tech stack. So that was the first movement, first act. The chain behaved for a few months, and then we started to onboard the teams. Trexx was the first one, but there are others that are already running, by the way, but they are in stealth mode. So one of them is really like stealth. We're not going to be disclosing until they are ready for it. That's a payments project, super interesting one. And there are others that are being onboarded, and we're going to be announcing, like we have like more or less like one project a week to be onboarded until the end of the year and beginning of January. So that's a lot. That's a lot of projects. And mostly we have a lot of social fi, as I said. But I would say actually that's a coincidence because our bigger vertical is actually RWAs, payments, and everything that touches fintechs, right? So a lot of tokenization companies, many of them working mostly with institutional capital, which is super interesting as well to see. So they have other requirements when it comes to governance, when it comes to the degree of control that they have on the chain. Not control in a centralization way, but like they want to whitelist wallets to interact with that chain. They want to make sure that they run the KYC and AML processes before allowing any money to be on-ramped in that chain. So these type of requirements it's a more robust governance and compliance framework. So that's a very cool use case for an Appchain as well, right? So you still can have the whole decentralization that we all love and we all advocate in crypto, but you can have way more controls in place. And that leads to another vertical that we have in Tanssi, which is the institutional vertical. And when it comes to institutional, we have like a big hospital exploring a solution that's based in blockchains, and they decide to deploy their own chain because of this governance aspect. We're not ready to disclose the name of the hospital, but it's a big hospital in Brazil. We have utility companies as well, exploring certain products that are crypto, like Web3 enabled. So they need a blockchain to run. So instead of just going to a shared smart layer like Solana or Ethereum mainnet, they prefer to just have their own chain. So that's a very interesting angle as well that we are exploring. And I guess we're going to see more use cases like this outside of Brazil as well, now that the regulation is really tractioning in the US as well. And with the US, the whole world is going to probably evolve regulatory-wise. So I think we're going to have some very cool announcements until the end of the year in that institutional side as well. So it's a lot of verticals, actually. If you think of Tanssi, it's as generic as AWS is, right? So you can run a bank on the AWS, you can run Netflix, you can run this streaming service that we are using right now, anything, right? So, and although, of course, as you said, right, we have limited resources. So as I said, like you have to have like a very focused strategy to double down in one or the other verticals. And I think the vertical that has shown the biggest traction and product market fit with Tanssi since the beginning is really this RWA and payments vertical. So that's where we put the most of our focus on in the BD side. But there are many other use cases, interesting ones that will be announced soon. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, you said a hospital, and that is the first time I have ever heard, I think, somebody telling me that they're going to onboard a hospital to crypto rather. That's crazy. So, it's funny. I think that what you just described there, when we were talking about LATAM for a second, I just think about like where I'm at in the US. And, a lot of my experiences in DeFi. So I've talked to a lot of financial providers in TradFi, a lot of banks, et cetera. And the most difficult part has been like internally, like at these institutions, like getting them to actually get over the learning curve of how do we transition from kind of like this dinosaur setup that we've had on the back end to, using something like crypto as our like network infrastructure and like integrating that into their internal workflows and so on. And like, that's a huge hurdle to overcome in terms of adoption. But it seems like, again, talking about LATAM, is almost like way ahead when it comes to that, like at the actual like personal level, at these organizations or these companies, is that the fintechs have almost kind of like set the stage for like the next thing, which is now crypto, and something like Tanssi, where they're kind of like ready, right? They're open to it. They're very forward thinking. And now they're ready to kind of take the next step of making their processes more efficient, and things like that. So it's just really cool to kind of see and kind of hear the progress that you guys have made since the last time we spoke, and kind of bringing things full circle, in terms of the roadmap. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah, but on that, I think like what actually opened the gates for this whole innovation process that we are seeing is the fact that the Brazilian central bank was always like very forward thinker. So regulation was not a problem. We were not, in this witch hunt in Brazil to everybody that wanted to launch a token or anything. So it was there actually. We had I was last year an advisor in a sandbox process in the central bank. So it was always very open. I'm one message away of the guy that's leading the Trexx, which is a CBDC project in the central bank. Like I can text him and he answers me, right? So it's really an open ecosystem, right? To engage with the regulators. So that's the key. So once you have that, of course, the banks, they have the reputational risk. So they didn't adopt it like upfront, right? But when the central bank had this approach, that the fintechs, they were like, okay, that's a very interesting way to have direct access to the central bank. All these projects that are being built. So the fintechs, they went ahead and started to launch crypto projects and use the sandboxes to explore. And then it created like a more safe ecosystem for the banks to come. And then the banks came. And then we started to see other companies, big companies that were like, okay, maybe that's a new tool that I can use in my whatever, in IP, right? So we were approached 2 years ago already by a clothing brand here in Brazil that they wanted to register IP using NFTs. So that was a cool non-financial use case as well. So we have a lot of stuff going on in that sense. So I think the key was like, opening the landscape regulatory wise, then the fintechs came, the banks, and then other stuff. So I think we are a few steps ahead of the US in this sense, right? I think, but this is going to come, and this is going to come with steroids, right? So the US, like the biggest economy in the world. So now you have the done part of the homework regulatory wise. I think the fintechs will take more risks. The banks are already moving pretty fast, actually, in the US. You see like announcements by Citadel, Franklin Templeton, you name it, all the big JP Morgan started this movement like way before, just didn't really release products. So I think it's going to happen even faster in the US because also you have more capital and everything. And I think this cascading effect is going to happen as well, like very quickly. I'm really confident on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and again, coming back to Tanssi, I think you guys are obviously well positioned on what you've built and kind of the thesis that many of these institutions are going to want to build their own L1, right? And so I think you guys are well positioned. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this. You guys also launched the token, I think, from the time that we previously spoke to now, right? You guys had your token launch. Let's talk about that a little bit. How did that go? How are you seeing the adoption of kind of like the rate that people are staking the token, or they're delegating the token to symbiotic vaults? How's the traction been on that level? And do you think that you guys have enough in terms of enough of the network staked at this point to scale these oncoming use cases, or is that a vector that you think you need to attract more activity towards?
Yeah. So before the token, right? So it was really a tough process, right? To launch the token, it's never easy. If you ask any founder who launched the token in Binance, like they're gonna tell you, like it's Binance, just to say one name, right? A bigger one, but like it's the whole process is a lot of negotiation, a lot of back and forth. There's the infrastructure integrations and everything. So it's a very rough process in general. But we managed to list in spot and futures. We are now live in Binance, Bybit, BaitGet, Kraken, Gate.io, so many, HTX, Maxi. So it was really very interesting, a very interesting process. I think we are very proud also of being able to launch also in DeFi same time. So the same day that we launched the token in centralized exchanges, we launched also a pool in Uniswap. We started with Uniswap v3 and then we migrated to v4. We have a very, very cool partner for the decentralized market making side, which is Arrakis. Really shout out to these guys. They're great. And they help us to make the markets for the decentralized pools, which is something that's not really, it's not every market maker that does. If you take like the bigger, like centralized exchange market makers, not all of them work with DeFi as well, because that's just another beast. When you talk about AMM DEXs, right? These guys helped us a lot. We are managing to have a decent level of liquidity also in DeFi, which is great. Futures are great as well. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because people can short your token, but they can also leverage long. So, I mean, I take it. It was a very cool launch, and having this setup, it's really cool. When it comes to staking, right? So the security of the network is ensured by not only Tanssi token, right, which is a very cool innovation, right? So we started by offering the staking in using restaking, right? So using symbiotic vaults to restake Ethereum. So the biggest vaults that we have these days are indeed the restaking vaults. Which makes sense, right? So Ethereum is way bigger than Tanssi. So it makes sense that financially speaking, the amount of staked value is coming more from ETH than from Tanssi. And we have this staking campaign going on. We have a very interesting APY, APR right now. I encourage everybody to have a look on it. But yeah, once we launched, we were approached about a bunch of people who invested in our community sale or early community builders, and they were like, yeah, I should stake. Like, how do I do that? So it was interesting to see this organic interest of the community for staking assets. We have two types of staking, right? So sometimes it requires a little bit of explanation on our side. So we have the staking on the Tanssi chain side, and we have the staking on the Ethereum side. So different rules, different APYs and APRs for each side. The Tanssi sequencing staking side, this is going to happen with the Tanssi substrate token, and the Ethereum side is going to happen with the ERC20 rapid version of the token. So yeah, we have a very comprehensive talk, but if anyone wants to know more about this, we are always here to to answer any question. But yeah, we are seeing a big traction on the block producer side. So a lot of node operators are approaching us and running sequencing nodes. The more we onboard new chains, we're going to have more demand for sequencing nodes, for validator nodes, and we're going to be onboarding even more node operators. That's actually very cool because we have a very big waiting list for people that want to offer this node services for Tanssi as well. So yeah, it's a very healthy balance in general. So builders, as we spoke in the beginning, stakers, some people that want to trade a token for different reasons, node operation side as well. So it's a very comprehensive ecosystem. Once you launch a token, your community gets bigger, right? It gets bigger. So you have different types of interests and different types of conversations. So it's a very interesting moment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, I think you guys have executed on the roadmap. We were talking about it before the show, but I'm sure, from your seat, at the foundation, that's what you want to see, right? Is the team kind of executing on the roadmap that you guys laid out, and it seems like you guys are. So it was great to catch up, Thiago. Thanks for your time. I think it's a good place to leave the conversation. Anything before we go? Any kind of parting words? Anything you wanna say?
Yeah, so we are actually cooking something. We even hinted it in social media. So we're going to have a new campaign coming up. So stay tuned. It's going to be a very, very cool one. I mean, the first campaign we run being live in mainnet with ecosystem projects already running in mainnet as well. So we are cooking something very different to what we usually had. So yeah, stay tuned. It's a lot happening. We are cooking, and we have a lot of announcements till the end of the year. So it's a lot of stuff coming from the oven.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks again, Thiago, for your time. Again, for anybody that hasn't listened to our original conversation, you can go check it out on Alia Research's website. So you can kind of get caught up on, where Tanssi has been, and then obviously this one to kind of catch you up. We also have a lot of content on Tanssi, and also some upcoming content to kind of aid you, in your educational journey to getting involved. So thanks again, everybody, for your time, and we'll see you on the next episode of Proof of Vision. Take care.
Thank you, Kurt.